I poured the second cup of coffee that morning before I realized I was still pouring for two. The mug sat there on the counter, steam curling up from it, and I just looked at it for a long minute. Then I dumped it in the sink and watched the brown swirl down the drain. That was a Tuesday. The Tuesday my son and his wife came over to talk about my future. I heard their car pull into the driveway around 10. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the obituary still open on the laptop, even though I'd read it about 100 times by then. 8 weeks. 8 weeks since my wife Joan died, and I still hadn't figured out how to be a man who drinks 1 cup of coffee in the morning instead of 2. My son's name is Preston. He's 39, works as a financial advisor at one of those big firms downtown in Hartford, the kind with glass walls and motivational posters about synergy. His wife Tabitha came in behind him carrying a leather portfolio and a Starbucks cup. She's a paralegal, smart woman. Too smart for her own good, in my opinion. But Joan always said I was too hard on her. "Dad," Preston said, kissing the top of my head like I was a child. "How you holding up?" "I'm holding," I said. "We brought breakfast," Tabitha said. She set a paper bag from the bakery down on the counter. Croissants, probably. The kind Joan never let me eat because of my cholesterol. "How are you sleeping? Some nights better than others?" I should tell you about myself before I go further. My name is Conrad Whitlow, 68 years old, retired structural engineer. 41 years with the same firm, designing bridges and overpasses across New England and parts of New York. Joan was a pediatric speech therapist for 35 years before she retired. We'd been married 44 years when the cancer took her. Pancreatic, quick and brutal, the way it usually is. We have 2 children. Preston, the financial advisor I just told you about, and our daughter, Imogen, 36, who works in pharmaceutical sales out in Pittsburgh. She's married to a man named Garrison, who calls himself a tech entrepreneur, which as far as I can tell means he's been between projects for the last 6 years, while she pays the mortgage. And then there's Felix. Felix is my late brother's boy. My brother Henry died of a heart attack at 51, and Felix's mother had walked out years before that, so Joan and I took him in when he was 14. He's 28 now, works as a forest ranger up in Vermont. Quiet kid. The kind who'd help you fix a fence post in the rain and then disappear before you could thank him properly. To me, he's a son, not a nephew. A son. Now you know everyone. Keep them straight, because what happens next is going to make more sense if you do. Preston sat down at the table across from me. Tabitha didn't sit. She walked around the kitchen, her eyes moving over things, the cabinets Joan had refinished herself 2 summers ago, the breakfast nook with the window seat, the gas range Joan had picked out when we remodeled in 2019. "Dad, we wanted to talk to you about something important," Preston said. He had his serious voice on, the one I used to use on him when he failed a math test in 7th grade. "All right. This house? It's a lot, Dad. 5 bedrooms, that big yard, the pool. Mom did a lot of the upkeep. You know that. I know what your mother did. I'm just saying, it's going to be a burden. The taxes alone in this neighborhood are what? 15 grand a year? 16? 17 this year? 17. He looked at Tabitha. She gave him a small nod, like a coach signaling from the dugout. "Dad, we think you should consider downsizing." There it was. That word, downsizing. The way they say it on television when they're firing somebody at the office. "Where to?" "There's a beautiful complex over in Glastonbury," Tabitha said. She finally sat down, opening that leather portfolio. "Riverbend Senior Living. 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom units. They have a community center, transportation to medical appointments, all the meals provided if you want. I cook my own meals. You wouldn't have to," Tabitha said brightly. "I want to." Preston leaned forward. "Dad, look. You're 68. The market in this neighborhood is hot right now. You could clear 7, maybe 800,000 on this house. Put it in conservative investments. Draw it down. You'd be very comfortable. And the equity?" He paused. Just for a second. But I caught it. "What about it? Where does that money go eventually?" "Well." He glanced at Tabitha again. "Eventually that's the estate, Dad. So Imogen and I would, that would come to us. Down the road. Down the road, right. So the issue isn't really that the house is too big for me. The issue is that you'd like the cash from it sooner than later. Tabitha jumped in fast. Dad, that's not. We're worried about you. About your safety. There were 2 break-ins on this street last year. Both of which happened to people who left their garage doors open at 3 in the afternoon. I lock my doors. Conrad, she said. And that's when I knew she was annoyed, because she only used my first name when she was annoyed. We just want what's best. For who? She didn't answer that. I stood up and walked to the window. The maple tree out front had started turning red at the tips. Joan had planted that maple 32 years ago when Imogen was born. She'd cried when the landscaper said it might not survive the first winter. I'll think about it, I said. I didn't think about it. Not the way they meant. But I let them go that morning thinking they'd planted a seed. 3 days later, Imogen called from Pittsburgh. She had her sympathy voice on, which is different from her real voice. Her real voice has more sharp edges in it. Daddy, Preston told me about the conversation. Did he? I think it's a good idea. Honestly, I do. It's not safe for you to be alone in that big house. What if you fell down the basement stairs? Nobody would find you for days. I don't go in the basement much. That's not the point. What is the point, Imogen? The point is, we love you and we want you taken care of. Garrison and I talked about it, and we think the smart thing is to start the transition now, while you're still healthy. Mom would have wanted that. I let her finish. I let her tell me about a friend of Garrison's who was in real estate and could list the house quickly. I let her tell me about a financial planner who specialized in transitions for the recently widowed. I let her tell me everything she'd rehearsed. When she was done, I said, I'll think about it. That's when the visit started in earnest. Preston came by twice a week with brochures. Tabitha emailed me listings of luxury senior apartments with subject lines like, Dad, saw this one and thought of you. Imogen flew in from Pittsburgh on a Friday and stayed the weekend, mostly walking through rooms with a notebook, making lists of what was yours versus Mom's. As if I didn't know. The worst was a Saturday 3 weeks in. I'd gone to the hardware store to pick up some weather stripping for the back door. When I came home, Tabitha's car was in my driveway. I walked in through the side door, and I could hear her in the dining room, talking to someone on the phone. Yeah, the dining set is solid mahogany, probably from the 70s. He'll never miss it. The china cabinet's got some pieces in it that are worth real money. His wife collected this Wedgwood. I set the bag from the hardware store down on the counter. Loud. She came around the corner with the phone still in her hand, and her face went white. Conrad, I didn't think you'd be back so soon. What are you doing in my house? Preston gave me a key. To check on you. We've been so worried. Get out. Get out of my house. Now. And give me that key on your way out. She left. She didn't give me the key. I changed the locks the next morning. Cost me $340, and it was the best money I'd spent in a year. Preston called me that night, of course. Furious. Dad, you can't just throw Tabitha out like that. She was upset. She was inventorying my furniture, Preston, on the phone. I heard her. That's not. She was probably just talking to the appraiser we hired. You hired an appraiser. A long pause. For estate planning purposes. I'm not dead yet, son. Dad! I hung up. That night I sat in Joan's reading chair in our bedroom for a long time, just sat there. The chair still smelled faintly of her, that lavender hand cream she used. I looked around the room. The dresser she'd refinished, the photographs on the wall, the closet I still hadn't been able to clean out, and I thought about what kind of mess I'd raised. Then I remembered the box. About 5 months before she died, when she was still well enough to drive, Joan had asked me to take her to her sister's house up in Litchfield. She wanted to drop off some things, she said, family things. She was gone with her sister for about 2 hours while I sat on the porch and read. When she came back, she was tired, but she had this strange little smile. What did you do up there? I'd asked her on the drive home. Visited my sister, Conrad. What do you think I did? That night, After I changed the locks and Preston hung up on me, I drove up to Litchfield to my sister-in-law, Bernadette's house. It was almost 10 when I got there. She was waiting up with the porch light on. "I wondered when you'd come," she said. "You knew." She told me a few weeks before she passed. Said you'd come when it got bad enough. She led me into her kitchen and pulled a wooden box out of the bottom of her pantry. Cedar with a brass clasp. Joan's handwriting on the top for Conrad. When you need it. I sat down at Bernadette's kitchen table and opened it. Inside were 3 things. A letter, written in Joan's handwriting. A manila envelope full of legal documents. And a set of 2 keys on a leather fob with a number burned into it. 47. I started with the letter. Conrad, my love, if you're reading this, you finally figured out what I knew the whole time, which is that our children love what we have more than they love who we are. I'm sorry, I tried for 44 years to raise them better. I think we did, in some ways. They're not bad people. They're just people who got too comfortable assuming that what was ours would one day be theirs, and they stopped seeing us as the people who built it. I want you to know that I loved you for 44 years, and I love you still. I'm not going to be there to take care of you, and I worry about that every day. So I did what I could. Bernadette has the keys to a place. The address and the deed are in the envelope. It's yours. It's been yours for 2 years now, though I never told you because I knew you'd argue with me about the money and I didn't have the energy. Don't argue with me now. I'm not there to argue with. Use what's in the envelope. Talk to the lawyer whose card is in there. Her name's Marisol Trent, and she's expecting you. She has all the documentation. Everything is legal, everything is yours, and everything is set up to make sure our children can't touch a penny of it. Take Felix with you. He's the only one of them who came to the hospital just to sit. I don't think they noticed, but I did. I love you. Don't be sad. Be free. Joan. I read it twice. Then I read it a 3rd time. Then I sat at Bernadette's kitchen table for a long time and didn't say anything. And Bernadette didn't say anything either. She just put her hand on top of mine and let me sit. The address in the envelope was a property up on a lake in coastal Maine. Place called Eastern Cove near a town called Hadley's Reach, about 4 hours north of where I was sitting. 3-bedroom timber frame house on 12 acres of wooded land with a private dock on a freshwater pond. Joan's father had owned a piece of land up there 60 years ago. I remembered her talking about it summers spent there as a girl. He'd sold most of it off in the 70s, but kept a small parcel. When her father died, the parcel had passed to Joan, and over the years she quietly bought back the surrounding lots from neighbors as they came up for sale. She'd done this without ever mentioning it, paying cash from money she'd inherited from her mother. 2.5 years ago, when she got the diagnosis the first time, she'd hired a builder. The plans were in the envelope. She'd designed the place herself, 3 bedrooms, because she wanted Felix to have a room, and she wanted me to have a study, and she wanted a guest room for whoever earns the right to visit. Those were her words. A wide front porch facing east because she knew I liked watching the sun come up. A workshop attached to the garage because she knew I'd want a place to tinker. A reading nook in the bedroom with bookshelves she'd already filled, with my books from our Connecticut house, gradually shipped up over a year so I never noticed which ones had gone missing from my shelves. The total amount Joan had moved was $375,000. From accounts I never paid attention to. From a stock portfolio her mother had left her that I'd always told her was hers to do with as she wished. From 2 small life insurance policies on her parents that I'd forgotten existed. She'd consolidated all of it, used it to build the main house and to set up a trust to cover the property taxes and insurance and basic upkeep for the next 25 years. And the Connecticut house, the one Preston wanted to sell so badly, the one Tabitha was already mentally redecorating, Joan had taken out a home equity line of credit on it 18 months before her diagnosis. $190,000 used to fund part of the main project. The payments were on auto pay from an account I never opened. She'd done it during a period when I was distracted with a major project at work, signed everything as primary borrower. Legal as could be. The house Preston thought was going to fund his retirement had maybe $50,000 of equity left in it, against $320,000 of combined debt. I started laughing right there at Bernadette's kitchen table. Couldn't stop. The kind of laugh that has tears in it and isn't quite a laugh, but isn't quite anything else either. Bernadette laughed too. She'd known. Joan had told her everything. She wanted me to tell you she loves you, Bernadette said, when I finally got my breath back, and she said she's sorry for laughing at them in advance, but she couldn't help herself. The next morning I called Marisol Trent. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Whitlow, I've been wondering when I'd hear from you. My wife was thorough. Your wife was a force of nature. I worked with her for almost 2 years on this. She knew exactly what she wanted. I drove up to Maine that weekend, just to see it. I told Preston I was going to a fly fishing weekend with an old friend from work, which was a lie that was easy to tell, because none of my children had ever paid enough attention to know who my friends were. The house was, I don't have words for what the house was. I pulled up the long gravel drive at sunset on a Friday in late September, and the cedar shingles were lit up gold in the evening light, and the pond out behind the house was perfectly still, and there was a single loon calling somewhere out across the water. I sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes before I could get out. The keys fit. Of course they did. Joan had made sure they would. Inside, the place was furnished. Not fully. She'd left room for me to add what I wanted. But the basics were there. A kitchen with butcher block counters and a 6-burner stove because she knew I liked to cook on Sundays. A living room with an enormous Riverstone fireplace and 2 leather chairs angled toward each other. A study with empty shelves except for one, and on that one shelf was the complete works of Wendell Berry, which I'd been talking about reading for 15 years and never gotten around to. In the master bedroom on the nightstand was a framed photograph of the 2 of us from 1982, on a beach in Cape Cod, both of us with too much hair and too much hope. There was a second envelope under the photograph. Marisol had called ahead to tell me where to find it. I didn't open that one yet. I wasn't ready. I drove home Sunday night and started planning. Over the next 4 weeks I played the part of a man slowly being worn down. I let Preston think I was reconsidering the senior living complex. I asked Tabitha to send me more brochures. I let Imogen fly in for another weekend, this one at the end of October, and I let her photograph rooms and make recommendations about what should be sold, donated, or kept. I let her think she was managing me. While they did that, I was emptying the house quietly. Felix came down on weekends. I'd called him the day after Maine and told him everything, and he'd cried, which was something I'd seen him do exactly twice in 14 years. We rented a storage unit in Wethersfield. Slowly, piece by piece, I moved out the things that mattered. Joan's pottery from the trip we took to New Mexico in 1994. The grandfather clock my father had built. The first edition of Walden she'd given me for our 10th anniversary. The quilts her mother had made. Photographs, letters, the silver service from our wedding. Everything I cared about. I left the heavy furniture. The mahogany dining set Tabitha had been salivating over, the china cabinet, the expensive-looking artwork that wasn't expensive at all but looked it. I left those for them to fight over. Preston nearly caught us once. I was loading a box of Joan's nursing books into my truck. Speech therapy textbooks, technically, but he wouldn't have known the difference when his car pulled up. Felix happened to be inside the house at that moment, which would have been hard to explain. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Donating books. The library does a quarterly drive." "Oh." He looked at the box. "That's a lot of books. Your mother had a lot of books." "Right." His face softened, just for a second. "Yeah, she did." For one moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I was going to ask you something," he said, "about the dining room set. Tabitha and I were thinking, when you do move, we'd love to take that, to keep it in the family. To keep it in the family. Yeah, you know, hand it down to you kids. Eventually." Preston and Tabitha had been trying for 6 years, by the way, with no apparent results. I nodded. We'll talk about it when the time comes. He drove off happy. The final family meeting was set for the second Saturday in November. I called it myself. Asked everyone to come. I told them I'd made a decision and wanted to share it. Preston and Tabitha showed up first in their matching cashmere sweaters. Imogen flew in Friday night and stayed at the airport hotel. Even she didn't want to stay in the house anymore, said it was too heavy. Garrison came with her, mostly silent, which was how he was best. Felix was there, sitting in the corner of the living room. They barely glanced at him. I was sitting in Joan's reading chair, which I'd carried downstairs that morning. There were folders stacked on the coffee table. I've thought about everything you've all been telling me, I began, about the house being too much, about making a fresh start, about being practical. Preston leaned forward. I could see him already counting. You're right. It's time for a change. Daddy, that's wonderful. I'm signing the house over to the two of you. Preston and Imogen. 50-50. Effective immediately. You should have seen their faces. Imogen actually let out a little gasp. Preston put his hand on Tabitha's knee like he was steadying himself. All you need to do is sign these documents accepting the transfer. I handed each of them a folder. They opened them. Dad, this is amazing, Preston said. We had no idea you'd read carefully. He started reading. Imogen started reading. About 40 seconds in, I saw Preston's eyes stop moving. He went back to the top of the page. Dad, he said slowly, what's this about a home equity line of credit? Your mother took one out about 2 years ago. For $190,000? That's correct. What did she do with that money? That's not something the deed transfer concerns itself with. Imogen was reading, faster now, flipping pages. There's also a primary mortgage of $130,000 still outstanding, Garrison piped up. He'd opened Imogen's folder. He was the only one who'd ever paid attention to numbers. Combined with the HELOC, that's $320 in debt, approximately. Dad! The house! What's the house worth? Honestly? Conservative appraisal based on current market and comparable sales around $385. Imogen made a sound like she'd been punched. That's $60,000 of equity, Garrison said. Total, split 2 ways. After realtor fees and transfer taxes, you'd each clear maybe 20 grand. That's it. That's correct. Preston stood up. Dad, what is this? It's exactly what you asked for. Early inheritance. The house. All yours. Take it. Where's Mom's money? Imogen demanded. She had savings. She had the inheritance from Grandma. She had. Your mother spent her money the way she wanted to. It was hers. There are detailed records with the lawyer if you'd like to review them. Everything is documented. Everything is legal. You can't just... Preston was sputtering. Dad, where are you going? Why are you doing this? I'm retiring properly. Somewhere quieter. I've already arranged everything. The movers come Monday. The house is yours by close of business Tuesday. Where, Dad? Where are you going? That's not your business anymore. You're our father. I am. And you're my son. And I love you. And I'm doing exactly what your mother and I should have done together 5 years ago. The fact that she had to do it for me from beyond the grave is on me. I should have seen it sooner. Felix is going with you, isn't he? Tabitha said suddenly. She'd been quiet, but she'd been thinking. He's getting something, isn't he? Of course he is. Felix didn't say anything. He just looked at her. Felix is family, I said. He's coming with me. What he gets and doesn't get isn't your concern. This is fraud, Imogen said. She was crying now, the kind of crying that's mostly anger. Mom couldn't have legally hidden $300,000 without telling me. She could. She did. She did. It was her money to do with as she wished. The lawyer can show you everything. I'd encourage you to call her, in fact. She's expecting you. Marisol Trent. Her card is in your folder. I stood up. You're welcome to stay in the house tonight. Any of you. I'm leaving in the morning. The movers will be here at 8. After they finish, The house is yours. Don't show up at the new place. Don't try to find me. If you want to talk, you can call. I'll think about whether to answer. Dad, Preston started. I love you. I love your sister. I loved your mother more than anything in this world, and you didn't deserve her either. Good night. I walked out of my own living room. Felix stood up and followed me. The drive to Maine the next morning took 6 hours. We took the back roads. I didn't want to be on the highway. Felix asked, somewhere around the New Hampshire border, "Are you okay?" I thought about it for a long time. "I will be," I said. The first morning at the lake, I woke up before sunrise. Habit, after 40 years of the same schedule, I made coffee in the new kitchen. 1 cup this time, on purpose, and walked out onto the porch. The pond was steaming in the cold November air. A pair of loons were calling somewhere out in the middle of the water. I sat down on the porch step and watched the light come up over the trees. That second envelope, the one I hadn't opened on my first visit, was on the kitchen counter. I'd brought it out with me. I opened it now. My love, you made it. I knew you would. I want you to know that I planned all of this not because I hated our children. I love them. I always will, but love and trust are different things, and they stopped being trustworthy a long time ago. You knew it too, even if you wouldn't say it. Remember when Preston borrowed $20,000 for the down payment on his first house and then forgot to pay it back for 9 years? Remember when Imogen called you old-fashioned for refusing to give Garrison money for his last business idea? We always smiled and let it go because we wanted to keep the peace. The price of peace was that they learned we'd never hold the line. I held it for you finally. Forgive me for doing it without telling you. I knew you wouldn't have let me. I want you to live a long time, Conrad. I want you to be happy. I want you to make friends with the man who runs the general store in Hadley's Reach. His name is Gunter, and he's got a dry sense of humor you'll like. I want you to learn how to fish that pond. The previous owner left rods in the workshop. I want you to plant a garden in the south clearing. I want you to teach Felix everything you know about how to be a good man. Because you taught him most of it already, and he just needs the rest. If our children come around, really come around, not the fake kind, leave the door open. If they don't, that's on them, not you. You did your part for 40 years. Your part is done. I'll see you on the other side, Conrad. I'll wait. Yours always, Joan. I sat on that porch for a long time after I read that letter. The sun came all the way up. The loons quieted down. Felix came out eventually with his own cup of coffee and sat beside me without saying anything. The two of us, just sitting there watching the pond. That was about 10 months ago. Preston and Tabitha got divorced 4 months after I moved. Turns out she really had been in it for the upgrade she thought was coming. When the upgrade fell through, so did the marriage. He sold the Connecticut house at a small loss in March, cleared maybe $19,000 after everything, just like Garrison had calculated. He's renting an apartment in West Hartford now. Imogen and Garrison are still together, technically, though I've heard from Bernadette through the family grapevine that things are bad. Garrison's latest venture failed and Imogen's been picking up the pieces. They tried to sue me once, briefly, with a lawyer who took one look at Marisol's documentation and told them to drop it before they spent more in legal fees than they'd ever recover. Preston called me about 3 months ago. First time I'd heard from him since the move. He didn't ask for anything. He just asked how I was. I'm good, son. That's good, Dad. That's good. A long silence. I owe you an apology, he said. I don't know if I'm ready to give a real one yet. But I owe you one. I wanted you to know I know that. I appreciate you saying that. Mom would be ashamed of me. Your mother loved you. She still does wherever she is. That hasn't changed. What changes is whether you decide to be the kind of son who deserves her loving you. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Can I call again?" "Yeah, you can call again. We've talked twice since. Short calls. Not about visiting yet. Just talking. He asked me what I'd been cooking. He asked me if Felix was doing well. He asked me what the lake looked like in the morning. Those were good questions. The kind he hadn't asked me in maybe 20 years. Imogen hasn't called. That's okay. Maybe one day. Maybe not. Joan was right that the door has to stay open. But she was also right that walking through it is up to them. Felix has built himself a small workshop out behind the garage where he repairs old wooden canoes. People drive up from Portland to bring them to him. He's saving money for a house of his own a few miles down the road. He says he wants to live close enough to come to dinner on Sundays, but far enough to feel like a grown man. I told him that sounded about right. I cook on Sundays, just like Joan said I would. I've gotten to know Gunter at the general store, who is exactly as dry as Joan promised. There's a widow named Constance who lives about half a mile away on the other side of the pond, and she brings me bread sometimes. And sometimes I bring her trout. We're not anything. We're just two people who lost someone and like each other's company on the porch on the Saturday afternoon. Joan would approve. I think she'd actually be a little impatient if I didn't. The garden in the south clearing came in well this year. Tomatoes, squash, 3 kinds of peppers. Too much for one man, so I take baskets to the food pantry in town every couple of weeks. The woman who runs it knows my name now. That's a strange feeling to be known in a place you've only lived in for a year. Most evenings I sit on that east-facing porch, even though the sun is on the other side of the house in the evening. I sit there because I can hear the pond better from that side. The loons are still here. They'll leave for the season soon. But for now, they call across the water at dusk, and I sit and I listen, and sometimes I talk to Joan. Out loud. I don't care if anyone hears me. There's nobody to hear me anyway. I tell her about the garden. I tell her about Felix's canoes. I tell her about Preston's calls. I tell her about the slow, careful way I'm becoming a different man than the one she left behind. Softer in some ways, harder in others. More honest with myself about what I want and who I want to give it to. I tell her thank you. Every day. For seeing what I couldn't see. For doing what I couldn't do. For loving me enough to plan for the version of my life she wouldn't be there to share. She knew me better than I knew myself. She always did. The light is fading now. The light is fading now. The loons are starting up. Felix is coming up the path from the workshop with sawdust on his shirt, and that quiet smile he started having more often lately. Tomorrow we're going to clean out the gutters before the snow comes. Tonight there's stew on the stove and a fire in the fireplace and a book I've been waiting 15 years to read sitting open on the arm of my chair. It's a good life. A small life. Not the one I planned. Maybe a better one. Joan would say I'm finally where I belong. Joan would say I'm finally where I belong. And for once, I'd have to agree with her. I've had almost a year now to sit on that porch and think about how it all happened. About what Joan saw that I didn't. About the slow, quiet way our children turned into the kind of people who could stand in our kitchen the day after her funeral and talk about square footage. The truth is, none of it was an accident. Every choice they made the day they came at me about downsizing was the harvest of choices Joan and I had made for 30 years before that. We gave too easily. We forgave too quickly. When Preston borrowed money and never paid it back, we let it go. When Imogen was rude to her mother, we made excuses. When Tabitha walked through our house touching things like she was already pricing them, we said nothing. We thought we were keeping the peace. What we were actually doing was teaching our children that there was no line we wouldn't let them cross. People learn what you let them learn. That's the law of it. There's no escaping it. What I wish I had understood at 50. What Joan figured out long before I did is that being a good man is not the same as being a soft one. I confused the two for 44 years. I thought love meant always saying yes. I thought patience meant never pushing back. But love without a backbone isn't love at all. It's just convenience for the other person. Joan held the line for me at the end because I never learned to hold it for myself. That's a hard thing to admit at 68 years old. So if you take anything from what I've told you, take this. Be kind, but don't be a doormat. Be generous, but don't confuse generosity with permission. Teach the people you love that you have a self that belongs to you, separate from what they want from you. The day you stop doing that is the day they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a resource. And do the hard work while you still can. Joan spent 2.5 years of her last years on this earth quietly building me a way out of a trap I didn't even know I was sitting in. That took planning. It took courage. It took her looking honestly at her own children and refusing to lie to herself about what she saw. That kind of clear-eyed honesty is the most underrated form of love I know. Felix asked me once, sitting on the porch, what I'd want my own grandchildren to learn from all this, if I ever had any. I told him I'd want them to learn that character is just the sum of every small choice you make when no one's watching. The way Felix sat with Joan in the hospital when nobody else came. That wasn't a grand gesture. It was 100 small ones. That's who he is now. Because that's who he was then. You become what you practice. So practice the right things.